Hello everybody, this is Mr. Everything and we're coming at you with another Wargaming in Miniature video. And today what we're going to do is we're going to build or assemble the Glaug Officer Battle Pod from Robotech RPG Tactics. The Glaug Officer Pod is a much larger model than the first two that I was doing, and it seems like it's a very easy model to assemble. And I've already done one, and this is the model itself, a finished completed version of it. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna assemble one from scratch, and I'll tell you how I went about and did it. All right, so let's go ahead and take a seat and get the parts out. It's my workbench. All right, these are the legs. You obviously have two legs, and they're split in half, and they go to, first of all, the officer's pod model seems to go together really well, except for a couple of exceptions, which we'll go over. So what I do is I put super glue along the outside edge of the model. What that does is not only does it seal the model closed, so when I paint it, you don't have like air holes, but it also fills any gaps. So if you've got any imperfections in the two halves, the super glue will fill in those, and then I can always scrape that off or clean that up later. Or I could do it now. I sometimes rub my finger over it so that you can get a clean line. What I also need to do is it wasn't fitting together perfectly along this one edge, so I decided to go ahead and add a little glue to that edge and hold it tight. When I hold my super glue tight, I usually hold it from anywhere between 30 to 60 seconds. If you apply quite a bit of pressure on it, if you are able to apply quite a bit of pressure, what will happen is you'll get a great bond. The plastic, the super glue will bond great. Yeah, so moving on to now that I've got both legs done, what we're going to do is we're going to assemble the torso together. And there's a left and right torso. This torso only has one pin in the front. There is no pins anywhere else. So basically that's just a pivot point. So when you put these together, you've got to look at it pretty closely along the top. Not so much the bottom, but look along the top and kind of get it to line up just right. And again, squeeze and hold for about 30 to 40 seconds. It's usually what I do. Now the glue I'm using is just simple, thick, like not gel, but just a thick super glue that you can get at any auto. I got it at a train shop. I think it was DP. No. Yeah, it's online. I got it at a train shop. All right, now these are the arms and cannons, the particle protection cannons. They come in two pieces, but when I pulled it out, I noticed that I didn't finish scraping them off. It's much better to trim any excess flash or trim before you assemble the model. That way you don't have to go back in later and try to trim places that are hard to get to. This really only has three sides, the top, bottom, and the back, because the front is open so that you can put another, we're going to glue another piece there later. Okay, and then you just, again, hold it together, and that's both arms. Okay, now what we do is we get out the, the piece that I pulled out is the hip. This is the hip for the torso. And if you look on the back side of the torso and the pin right there, there's only one way it can go on. It was very confusing at first when I looked at it. But you will see that there's kind of like a curved area on the bottom, and then it has those two retaining bars or 2 ridges, and then on the bottom of the hip, you're going to see a sloped circle and a little tab, right? Well, what I did was I put the tab in between those 2 ridges, and I put the sloped edge against the body, as you can see right there. And I have applied glue already, and that should be done. So we're going to set that off to the side. And let that dry just for a moment. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and glue on the fronts of the arms, which would be, I guess, the barrels for the dual forearm 44 millimeter electromagnetic rail cannons, and the 109 and the heavy particle cannons, I suppose. I mean, I'm looking at the stats, but I can't really, because, yeah, it's probably the dual forearm heavy particle cannons and the dual forearm 44 millimeter electromagnetic rail cannons. They go in real easy. And now that they're both done, we'll set those to the side, and then we'll pull out the feet. All right, now on the feet, this is kind of confusing for me on the feet, because of course the front and the back slope toes or the heels are all exactly the same to me. They look very similar. But on the inside, where you can see right there, there's a couple of slopes. You have a really long slope back here, and then you got a really short slope right here. And now when you look, so which one's supposed to be the front, which one's supposed to be the back, it's kind of hard to tell. Now on the leg, you have like a big toe or whatever that sticks out the front, and then it slides on in there and just kind of rests inside there. So now, should it be resting forward or should it be resting backwards? I don't know, because they both look right. So what I've done is I've decided to rest the long edge of the heel of the leg inside the foot along the long edge, and then the short edge against the short edge, because that just seems logical to me. Now I've also leaned it inwards. You can kind of see where the pin that would hook into the hip is right there, and it has a little play where it can lean left or right or inside or outside. So I leaned it inward so the feet would be kind of spread out and the legs would be kind of angled inward. Okay, let's do the second leg. And then you get kind of 2 legs kind of leaning inwards towards the hip. That's the idea right there. Now right now you still probably see a lot of imperfections along the edges and the ridges and stuff like that. Well, when we get ready to paint and prime, that's going to hide all that. But I'll show you that later, because that's not the subject of this video. We're only assembling. Now there's the holes in the hip. You got the left hole and the right hole. Those are kind of like grooves that those pins rest in. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to do something. I'm going to let those legs dry, but we're going to do the engine exhausts for the back of the torso. Now, I don't know if those are engine exhausts. They seem like they would be engine exhausts, but they could very well be the 150 millimeter short-range missile tubes. The back end of them for the backblast or whatever. Now, there's a groove on the back of the torso, and there's a slot in the engine exhaust. So when you put them on, you just have to line the slots in with the grooves. Or I should say the slot with the groove, yeah. And then you'll have perfect alignment. Pretty simple. Those are pretty much a no-brainer. Now I'm just reattaching it. twisting it just to make it look like it's in the exact right perfect spot. And let's put that off to the side so it can dry. I'm always fiddling with it, you know, just try to make it look exactly right. But so far so good. Now what we're going to do is put the front nose on. I guess that's the cockpit sensor, so I can actually see outside his mecha, because there's a Zentradi pilot inside this thing, which would fill up the entire cockpit pretty much. Now, just put a little glue on it, put a little pressure, line it up, done. All right. Now all we got to do is push that off to the side and pull out the next thing, which I think is going to be, we're going to take a short break here, and okay, well, no, we're not. What we're going to do is we're going to add the 128 millimeter charged particle cannon. It has a weird hole. It has like a, oh, I'm not going to put the charged particle cannon on. Okay, we're going to put that on after we do the legs. So I pull the base out, I line up the legs the way I think I want them, and I'm going to put them back a little bit further because I'm going to be putting most of my mecha a little bit further back on the base so that it can lean, all the guns will be forward. Now I'm just kind of basically trying to eyeball it and figure out exactly how wide the legs need to be so that the legs can hook to the hip. So right now I'm just basically swagging it, which is a scientific wild ass guess. Yeah, but I'm just kind of, it's not hard. I mean, it was kind of like easy to figure out. It's not like, it wasn't rocket science. So now what I'm going to do is just apply some glue, put it down, and then what we'll do is we'll put the other leg on there. But that's one reason why I put it further back in the base, so that, because most of these models have guns or protrusions that stick out to the front of the model. Maybe not so much the battle pods, I've noticed, but like the officer pod and all the UEDF mecha have stuff sticking out the front, like cannons or rifles or something like that. So I wanted them to be self-contained inside the base circle, if that makes any sense to you guys out there. I will be putting a gravel flock material on the base, but that'll be after painting. I like to paint and then I'll put the base flock on, or at least after priming. But yeah, it's usually after painting. While that's sitting there like that, I get the torso ready. Put a little glue in the hip joint in those slots so that they can go into the upper legs. And believe it or not, it fits in there just right, and with very little finagling, it locks into place. And I was very happy with that. Okay, so what we do is we let that dry for a moment, and now that it's dry, we bring it back, and we're going to, I don't take the arms and hook them on directly because there's a little nub on the arm that has to be cut off. I say it has to be cut off because it doesn't fit into the torso. The nubs don't fit into the arm slots of the torso. They make them stick out a good distance, you know, which is probably accurate for the model, but they wouldn't hold. There was no way that that little dot is going to hold that whole arm. So what I do is I cut off the entire nub flush with the model so it's a completely flat surface. And then I'll do the same with, well, I'll do the same with both arms, and I'll also do the same with the torso, because the torso has a little piece, that a little circle, that a disc kind of sticks out, and it's supposed to accept these nubs, but the nubs are too big for the discs, so you're going to have to cut something. So I just cut both of them and made them a completely flat surface, and here I scrape it flat for the auto, well, what are those? You know what I mean. Those are those dual cannons. And I do the same for the torso. And that way, when I glue them together, they'll just fit completely flat against each other. I even considered drilling a hole with a pin vise into both and using some kind of pin mechanism to pin both of them, but I decided against it. I'm not going to pin it. Okay, and while that, yeah, I had to trim the bottom of the autocannon because, or the charged particle cannon, because it wouldn't fit in the hole in the top of the cockpit. But once you trim it a little bit, then it fits in there nice and snug. There is a lot of trimming to do on these Robotech models. Don't be afraid to do a little trimming. And then it just snaps right on in there. And now it's starting to look like the Glaug officer pod. All right, so now what are we going to do? I was thinking I was going to let them dry, but I know what I want to do is get my arms ready so that when we go to glue them on, and these little pieces here, we're going to have to glue them on too, and you can barely see those. There's the 28. Let me look. 22.3 millimeter autocannons that go in the cheeks, and then you have a radio antenna that sticks out of one of the upper cheeks. And those things are so small, I wish I had my tweezers with me. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the arms on first. And that way, that can get to drying. And I'll just put a dab of glue on both sides so that when I pull the arms up, what I'll do is I'll rub a little bit of the glue that I dabbed onto the arm joint and set it off to the sides with a little bit of glue on it. And then I'll do the same thing for the other side. Now the reason why I do that is now I've got glue on both the torso and the arm, and I let it sit there just for a moment while it gets a little tacky. And then while it's tacky, I'll stick it together, and of course I'll do my pressure, for 30 to 40 seconds or so. And once that's done, I'll go ahead and do the right arm. Now what I've decided to do is elevate the right arm, kind of twist it so it looks like it's shooting up into the air, kind of like Chiron, I should say. But the main reason why I did that was I wanted my Glaug to look a little different than my first Glaug, so that it could be a hero or a champion. And so there you go. Now you've got like a normal left arm, and my right arm's up shooting into the air. Starting to look good. Now the only thing left is the two autocannons and the antenna. And this is how it compares to the other Glaug, which has both cannons just in the normal position. And there's the autocannons. It looks like they're in their cheeks, and then there's the antenna right there. Those pieces are super small. You might need some tweezers to put those on, but I was able to do it with my fingers. Just be very careful, because you could lose them into the carpet or something, because I've dropped them a couple of times, but luckily they all stayed on the table. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a drop of glue in these two holes. There's one there and one there. You can't see my finger, but it's there. And a third drop of glue into where the antenna goes. If you look closely, you can see the little hole. It's not really a hole. It's kind of like an indentation right there. Okay. And then the antenna goes in that little slot right there. Now, if you take one of these autocannons and you put it in the hole, pretty much the super glue liquid almost holds it immediately, but it's not perfect. You got to get it kind of angled. And so what I did was I grabbed my X-Acto and I used it as kind of like, I guess I could have used a toothpick or something, but I just didn't have, just wasn't thinking. There we go. Now, in the pictures, I see those things are kind of pointed to the ground, like they're shooting at Micronians, but I've decided to go ahead and angle them forward. But I guess they pivot on a swivel. Whoops, dropped it. They pivot on a swivel, so they really could be facing in any direction you want. They could be putting, they could be facing straight out like cat whiskers if you wanted. But I thought looking kind of straight forward was kind of the more sexy look, but they could be anything, any direction. And I tweak them around a little bit, and they don't have to be facing the same direction either. They can be, from a lot of the pictures I've seen, they can be pointing in any direction. Now the antenna, the hole for the antenna, it's a very small hole. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. But the glue itself should be able to hold it right into place. And I don't want the antenna, me personally, I didn't want the antenna to be shooting straight up. I wanted it to be going out at an angle, not a 45, but a little bit of an angle away from, yeah, like that. All right, that model is pretty much done. Got the antenna there, angled out, got the autocannons right there. Okay, and I zoomed in a little bit, but my t-shirt and the lamp that I was using kind of makes it hard to see. But there you can see the antenna, the cannons, everything. And that thing is finished. So now we're going to take the Glaug officer pods and we're going to compare them against the UEDF destroids that I've already put together, just as a size comparison, just so you can see how much bigger these Glaug officer pods are. They're monstrous. They're about half again as big as those as the destroids, but they're supposed to be, because the destroids are supposed to be about the size of a Zentradi soldier, maybe a little bit bigger, and a Zentradi soldier is supposed to be able to fit in the Glaug officer pod to be able to pilot it. Well, that was our third episode of Wargaming in Miniature. And thanks for coming out and checking out this assembly of the Glaug officer pod. And I'll catch you next time.